Oh, there we go. That's much better. I think we're coming on after some light IT issues. And we're here.
We're here.
So happy Thursday, everybody. We are
Hi,
back.
everybody.
Hey, everyone. We have a special guest today. We're going to be talking about how to use state and local
Hi,
government contracts
everybody.
as a springboard into the federal space. So I'm Ashley Dole, if you're new here, and Natasha Velez with NVS Strategic Solutions. And we're joined by Angela Seymour. Angela, you want to tell the audience sort of a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a native New Englander. You'll see all the Boston Red Sox posters behind me. My background is in public procurement. I was a procurement officer for Lexington County, South Carolina for over 15 years. Anything that basically means anything above $15,000 came across my desk. My specialty is in horizontal and vertical construction. I was also a procurement trainer for the state of South Carolina as well too in their procurement program. So I'm familiar with the state between working with the local side and who utilize the state contracts, and then obviously the state being their training program. And then I also worked for the University of Massachusetts with their PTAC program when it was the PTAC program. And now I've been with the University of South Carolina in their Apex Accelerator program for working on a year. So happy anniversary to me.
Yes, happy anniversary. I didn't even realize it's been a year already.
I
Time
know I've
flies
already been
fast.
here almost a year.
Wow. So, with your background, and I know we covered this topic recently, but Natasha and I, want to grow you too and make sure that, we're hearing it from both sides of the fence, and talk a
Mhm.
little bit about like what are some of the goals that you think small businesses should be striving for in the SLED marketplace? Like they're new to the space, mostly probably focusing on solicitations. Like what
Mhm.
advice would you give them just to kind of give them some direction?
I think that it's going to be the same advice that you're going to get in the federal marketplace is getting out there, making sure that they know about you and that they can utilize you for micro purchases. Anything that is a request for at Lexington is now $25,000. So anything under $25,000, especially if you are doing construction, small remodeling jobs, it's going to be under $25,000. If you're doing some janitorial service, there might be a specialty just under $25,000. So you want to be sure that you're being utilized under that $25,000 mark. Well, how do I do that? You need to get out and start doing introductions, making sure that you know who the people are that you need to be talking to, when you need to be talking to them. I tell people all the time, the procurement department is like highway patrol. We're there to issue tickets and making sure the rules get followed. We don't make the decisions. We're there to make sure that the people that are making the decisions are doing it correctly. So you can always start by talking to the procurement officer, or but your next step really logically should be getting out there and finding out who's over construction. Is it a facilities department? Is it a building services department? Is it going to be the same for law enforcement? Because a lot of times there's going to be law enforcement that they have their own building services. So if you have a jail or a sheriff's department or a law enforcement facility, they're going to have their own. And those people are going to be the different people.
Sorry, I was on mute. That's really good advice. I'm such a huge proponent. Like, don't forget about the fact that while it's the government, these people are still that people. They're humans. This is a human transaction. Um, people like people, if people buy from people they like, don't forget that.
Mhm.
So, the power of relationships is definitely going to be a strategic advantage.
And knowing that those relationships can be changed because you don't know what they're going to have currently in place. They might have a contractor in place that's a complete terror. And that's what you're not going to know that. So that's the importance of bringing who you are and the difference that you can make for them.
Really agreed.
I love that. I do have a question for you though.
Sure.
What is the biggest difference that you see between SLED and federal space? Can you
Um,
differentiate?
There's going to be two things that I see. Obviously, is going to be the purchasing thresholds. The purchasing thresholds at the federal level are so much higher. You're talking about the simplified acquisition procedures is at $250,000. That's before they have to go up for that quote. Where the state level, it's $100,000. Where the local level, it's going to be 25, 30. Could be a smaller agency. It might be $10,000 they have to go out and advertise. It's that is the really important thing of getting out there, finding out what their purchasing ordinances are and what their rules are. And then also accessibility as well too. How do I, it's going to be a lot harder at the Department of the Army to get a hold of facilities manager than it is going to be for a county or a town or law enforcement or a university. There's going to be more likely to be accessible to those departments.
I think it would be easier also to, if it's local to you in your SLED, it's easier for you also to market to those people because they're easily accessible to you versus the federal.
Absolutely.
You can build those relationships. So
And
yeah,
a lot of times too, when you're talking about towns and counties, there's county council. They're out there looking for votes. So,
yeah,
making sure that you're talking to as much as the procurement people hated it, getting out there talking to your county councilman, talking to your mayor, talking to whoever it
right.
is. I've got a brand new business. I've decided to bring my business to your location. How can I get involved with your agency? Whatever it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great.
It's a great question. And one thing that I hear complaints of from small businesses, who maybe didn't know about the opportunity in the SLED market, maybe they were previously focused on federal, and it makes sense for them, whether it's based on what they do or just whether it's an easier path to engage in the SLED market. I find a lot of times that they'll end up very scattered, right? These humans are in different states at the county, the city, the state level. How do you get to the bottom of it? How do you know
Mhm.
exactly who you need to know, essentially? Will you find that information on the state's procurement website?
Mhm. And I know with the state of South Carolina, they have a list of their procurement officers for each agency because with the state, they have a big agency where they have the MMO, which is now the State Fiscal Accountability Authority. And within the MMO, say you have the Department of Administration. Well, they have their own procurement team. SLED, which is law enforcement, that they have their own procurement team. So, who do I talk to and when do I talk to them? And also getting to know the school districts as well too. Because the school districts under a certain purchasing threshold, they're purchasing themselves. Where under, a certain or over a certain purchasing threshold, they got to turn it back over to SPA to turn around and bid it for them.
That's interesting, and a lot of similarities, with the federal space when it comes to, you have your departments, you have your sub agencies, and then you have your procurement offices, all different staff,
Mm-hmm.
different locations. So, I mean, pretty consistent. And the only difference I'll say to watch out for if you are focusing on SLED is, like Angela referenced, each state sort of have their different procurement code. Like, I feel very fortunate, being a counselor in South Carolina, that South Carolina goes by the FAR, but that's not always the case,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you do have to be cautious. They are not all the same. Just take a look at that state's procurement website or that county's procurement website and read, right?
Absolutely.
This is a
And take a
really
look at their ordinances. And some of them may not be an ordinance. It might be written into law. It might be something like at the state level, you're going to be going to look at the law versus the county, which is technically it's an ordinance, but many people don't know to go look at the word ordinance to go find those regulations.
And
Right.
another big difference is going to be your certifications. That's
Mm-hmm.
one we haven't touched on yet. So at the state
Absolutely.
level, we have in South Carolina DBE and MBE, but there's no equivalent of a WBE, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some states that are now acknowledging LGBTQ and they have
Mm-hmm.
their own programs for
Massachusetts is
that.
one of them.
Now,
Mass
each
is
state also kind of uses those programs in a different way. So before you go willy-nilly signing up for DBE in all 50 states, understand how that state uses the DBE or the MBE or whatever certification it is, to kind of make an educated decision on, will this benefit me? I once had a client bidding on an opportunity in another state, and while she was registered as an MBE in that state, because she didn't live in that state, that
Mm-hmm.
certification was a little bit useless for her because the priority was given to companies
Right.
within that state. So just kind of something to look out for.
And that's another thing that we haven't touched upon yet. And it's one of the challenges you're going to see at the state level is they have in-state preference where they're going to give a certain percentage of preference at the time of evaluation to a certain state. So South Carolina, if you are located in the state of South Carolina, you have one preference. If your product is made within the state of South Carolina, so if you have an ammunition company that is located and making their product within the state of South Carolina, you get to have the double combination of both set asides. So you get to have, and that's going to be during an evaluation process. So how does that work? So say you bid $1,000 and you're getting 10%, 5 for the location, 5 for the, it being manufactured here. That means at the evaluation period, if you are $1,000 and your competitor's $1,000, they're going to be evaluating you at $900. So now you've just secured the bid. You're charging $1,000, but now you're going to be evaluated at $900. So you have won or secured that during an IFB.
Which is pretty
Even
much the
if you're
same
not,
concept for the Hub Zone program, the 10%
yeah.
price preference they have as well. I'm sorry, Natasha, what were you going to say?
No, I was just thinking about that. There was one where we had a client who was not located in the state, but the state knew that a lot of the vendors were not going to be bidding that were, located, were outside. It was like really close to California. So they knew that a lot of people from California were going to be bidding on this. So they created a subcontractor preference where that, okay, fine. If you're located in California or outside of state, that's fine, as long as you utilize vendors and subcontractors or, for instance, if you're going to purchase lighting, if you're going to be purchasing or you're going to be utilizing labor, there is a preference and you get more points towards your, proposal and your submission if you hired within the state. So even though you weren't located, your resources were in that state. So you're still keeping funding going through it. So
Right.
that
I
pretty
love that incentive personally because
Yeah.
I mean it's common in construction that the large GC that
Mm-hmm.
wins the contract is not
Yep.
located in the in the geographical area that the project is. So
Mm-hmm.
aside from sending their project manager, most of the time it makes sense from a price standpoint for them to use local contractors. And that
Yeah.
provides great opportunity to the small businesses who are in that local area. I mean, look, guys, you get to stay out of the whole bid proposal. That's a win in my book.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's
Natasha
also
knows how I
other
feel about proposals.
there's also, other states that may have a reciprocity. So North Carolina may have a reciprocity where they go by South Carolina's rules as well, too. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up as well, too, when we're talking about set asides is what I tell my clients all the time. Federal doesn't recognize state, state doesn't recognize local, and it goes the same way up. They don't recognize each other. So as you were talking about with the state of Massachusetts, where they have, or I'm sorry, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I'll get kicked out of the state. They'll be like, no, you can't come back. Sorry, mom, I can't come
You're
home.
fired.
I've been booted out of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. With the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they have the LGBTQ. Well, the state, the city of Boston may have it, but the city of Springfield doesn't. So they
Right, they're
wouldn't
not going to go.
necessarily recognize it. In South Carolina, there's a lot of conservative counties. The larger counties, they might have a set aside program. Richland County has a DBE set aside program. Lexington County, very conservative. They're like, no, we, sharpen your pencils, bring your best price. So that you have to take that into consideration as well, too. Is just
Does
because it's a
Richland,
larger county, it depends on how it's run.
Yeah.
does Richland County, even though they have their own DBE, will a state DBE be accepted by Richland County or no?
No, you would have to apply for their individual, and that's gonna be the city. The city of Columbia is located in Richland County, and that's the same thing. They have their own DBE as well, too. Now,
Okay.
again, it may vary. It could vary where they say, no, we're going to follow the state's DBE, because one of the other things that we haven't talked about is DOT. DOT has that set aside for women-owned, minority-owned, disadvantaged businesses. And when you're using DOT funds at the local level, so Lexington County had a pot, they called it the C Fund pot, and it came from the state C Fund program. When they were bidding with those funds, they had to follow what was in place, and the attempt at 5% of getting your contractors as a set aside. So sometimes they spent that entire pot of money on a line striping program where 100% of it's going to be done by the set aside, because it's a small business set aside for line striping. Or if they're bidding out a large project, they may only have, they might be having a contractor who's making an attempt. It's a goal. It's not necessarily a hard and fast. It's not a rule. It's a goal of making an attempt at, okay, for my mobilization, I might use this minority contractor as far as the state of South Carolina goes. For whatever it is, for line striping, we're going to use this. So this is going to equivalent to 15% of my bid.
That makes sense. And on that note, this is even because, I come from the federal space, and Natasha and I, as we're wiggling our way into our local market and kind of exploring how all of those operate, it does sort of put me back in those beginner days, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm a little overwhelmed. There's so many cities, so many counties, everybody's got their own certifications. Like, what resources or support systems would you recommend to a small business trying to understand and access the SLED opportunities just in their backyard? Because honestly, that's when you can be most competitive on price, as if it's right next to it. So what would you recommend?
So obviously, the Apex Accelerator, we have our bid match program, and, an Apex Accelerator counselor will walk you through who's going to be utilizing our state of South Carolina's website. We have that procurement map page. And when I'm meeting with my clients, I literally will walk you through that map page and say, okay, you need to look at this county, you're brand new, you're located in Charleston, you're doing HVAC. There's no point of coming up to Columbia because you're going to spend more money on your overhead and gas mileage or mobilization. I would also say, if you're going to look in the region area, say that's something you can offer regionally, look at NASPO. It's the National Association of State Purchasing Officials. They have a United States map on there. Ashley, I showed it to you yesterday, of where you go to click on the map. And that also includes the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Guam, and, Alaska and Hawaii too. So if you can do things regionally somewhere else or across the United States, go to NASPO. And when you click on that state, you'll be able to see the staff, the head of that procurement office. And most of the time, I'd say 3/4 of the time, you're going to have access to that state's e-procurement system. State of Hawaii is one I always show, because I'm like, we were just talking about this. Who doesn't want to go to Hawaii? So you go on there, you click on Hawaii, and Hawaii is a great system. They have an e-procurement system. You can go out and see their pricing. And, can I be competitive being in South Carolina, going all the way out to Hawaii? It may not work out for them. So that's why, just going out there, doing your market research. But as you said, too, stay regional. Start regionally if you can. Now, if you're a product that you can sell e-commerce, then it doesn't matter. You can look anywhere. But, if it's an e-commerce, but if you're doing janitorial and it's tied to you physically being located somewhere, then you're going to want to stay regionally to start.
Natasha, do you have any more questions for Angela? We have time for maybe one or two more.
All right.
Yeah, I got you. Are there any specific certifications or qualifications that a small business enterprise should pursue in order to possibly enhance their competitiveness in regards to SLED with the procurement process?
So it's going to depend on each state. Each state will be different. So as we talked about with the state of South Carolina, you have your your DBE set-asides, your minority business set-asides with DOT. And I would encourage you for each state, no matter where we're looking, even if it's in Florida or wherever, look to see if the DOT has its own set-aside that's going to be different as well too. Doing outreach to the bigger counties and the bigger cities, look at their set-asides as well too.
Do they have requirements like the federal government? Like, what is the difference with the set asides?
So the set-asides with the state, again, it's going to be, one's not going to be required. If you
Mhm.
have, say, if you're a veteran-owned small business located in South Carolina, the only place it's going to be taken that you're a veteran into consideration is going to be at the federal level. There's
Okay.
no specific set aside at the state and local levels
Okay.
just for veterans. So then you would want, okay, now how do I get in there? Well, if you are a minority-owned business, you could apply for the Minority Business Enterprise Program. If you are a small business, you can apply for the Small Business Set-Aside Program. Each state may be different. There might be a women-owned business, or as Ashley said, the LGBTQ set-asides as well too. But the state,
WMBEs recently as well.
I'm sorry?
I've seen some WMBEs recently as well.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen those a lot on the county level.
We were actually going through a bunch of different states recently. I mean, the processes are all different. Like, there's really no consistency except for in the documents that you submit. And the exception to the rule, in talking about, states accepting other states, New York actually accepted a Florida MBE
Really?
certification
Oh,
as
wow.
proof of minority status. So, we got to skip a couple of documents in the submission of that one. But it's definitely been a learning process. And I can imagine a lot of companies are, just intimidated by SLED because they don't know where to go. But oftentimes it's so much easier to kind
Yeah, I
of get
agree.
your footing, to get your foot in the door and to
Absolutely.
start performing so that you have something. The most common complaint I get is, how do you convince the federal government you've got experience when
Mhm.
you don't have any experience?
I hear
Get
that
some
a lot.
experience with the SLED market. That's a
Right.
great testimonial, if you will.
No, and I agree 100% on that. I tell my clients all the time, experience begets experience. So, that is when you get in and you do those micro purchases under $5,000. You go out and you do a request for quote and you do the work. I had a client this week that reached out to me and he's like, well, right now I'm not ready to go federal. I don't want to go work at a Fort Jackson or a Charleston Air Force Base, but I'm eventually wanting to go there. How do I start? Well, that's when you're going to go. This client was located up in Greenville. That's when you're going to go to Greenville County and find out. One of the other ones that that's not actually commonly known is that look at the grant programs for each agency as well too, because the counties have HUD grants that are issued to them. Lexington had the Community Development Block Grant and the HOME. It's called the Home Grant. And what it is you're doing renovations under a certain threshold. So I think the home grant was under $35,000. So it's, something that the top is going to be $35,000. Well, how do I get on that list? You need to talk to the community development. You need to talk to the economic development departments. Don't pigeon yourself into thinking, I do housing renovations, I do roofs, I do
Right.
HVAC. That's all I can do. No, look at other options, look at other pipelines that you may not be aware that are there.
I would agree because we had one where I had a client and we had to think outside the box for her because she does accounting. And in the federal space, the accounting is usually, harvested by large Deloittes and things of that nature. It's really hard to break it in as a small business for accounting. So she kind of, she had to pull back and we went in more of a SLED way because each county needs, bookkeeping, accounting, and internal audits. So that was an easier route. But again, you have to be massive. Who's your managing partner? Who's this? Who's that? She's a one band stand. So she goes in, she starts with products, accounting products, selling
Right.
accounting software, being a QuickBooks partner, being a Uninet partner, building her way in, gaining past performance and a relationship with her local county and cities that she's providing, products. And eventually she gets a service
Right.
contract because she utilized the
Right.
past performance. It's still the same, the same product, same industry, the same people you're marketing now. You're just moving from products to service. But it got her in the door to speak to the right people. She had enough past performance to kind of get her through the door. They give her a shot. And now I think she's actually bidding, she's using the county and city wins as her past performance for her federal wins.
Sure.
And so she
Sure.
got her 8A. So sometimes it's okay to kind of take a step back and start and get, as long as you're getting your foot in the door, and start small and scale, especially if you
Mhm.
don't have that past performance, to build it in a different way.
Right.
And I gotta say, this is a foolproof strategy for those of you who may be in IT services. One of the
Oh, yeah.
biggest complaints that I hear is, I need a facility clearance for everything.
Yeah.
There's only two ways to get it. A prime's got to sponsor you, or an agency's got to sponsor you. And until you've got a
Right.
contract, no one's going to sponsor you. So how do you
Mhm.
really start making traction? Well, the states and the counties don't require you to have a facilities clearance guide, so that one barrier to entry is removed. Go do what you do well at the
Right.
SLED level, build up your past performance, become more attractive to those primes, and they'll want to sponsor you for that clearance because you
Yep.
know what you're doing.
And kind of
Yep.
piggyback that on that too, Natasha. With that sort of thing, the bigger companies don't want to come into the smaller marketplace.
Yeah.
They're going to lose money. There's no way that they're going to be able to come in and make money on it. They want to stay into that bigger marketplace.
Right.
There's a lot of agencies in South Carolina. I mean, you think of we are a 46 county state. There's a lot of agencies that, they do onesie twosies. When I was working at Lexington County, we would do over 100 solicitations a year. It's a large county. We are, multi-$100 billion budget or $100 million budget. So there's more there. Where
Yeah.
I was once at a conference and this lady's like, I am the only procurement person in our whole county. And I'm like, oh, wow. How many solicitations
Oh,
are you doing a year? She goes, 8. And I'm like, oh my
wow.
God, I do like 8 in like 3 months, maybe not more. So, oh, we do 8. So, something like that where you're talking about, sometimes the procurement department is run by finance.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I have various opinions on why that's not a good thing, but you shouldn't be stealing
There's
from people to
internal
pay the
control issues there, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's besides the point. That's besides the point.
Yeah.
But when you have something like that, a finance department, they
Yeah.
might not have a finance person. They might have to third party a lot of things because they are a smaller county. They still have to follow the rules for those for whatever the state solicitations. They still have to follow those public rules. But
Right.
they don't, they are a little more, that's not when a Deloitte's going to want to come in. They're going to want to
No,
wait.
and they're not going to win, because I've noticed that a lot of it really is LPTA. They
Mhm.
want you to have that experience, but not at the point where, because their budget is not as, it's not as huge as the federal government. And, Deloitte, and, respect to Deloitte and all the big four, but, the smaller counties, they're looking for smaller businesses that can price at a better, reasonable rate, and that are local, and that can help them. And they're so small, they don't need that. They don't need the big ones. So sometimes we get scared. I know a lot of
Mhm.
people see who's following these opportunities, and a lot of people get scared and they're like, oh no, but that's only like half of the people that are going to even apply. But ultimately, I would agree. They're usually very small, and they usually go for the smallest businesses that still have that experience and can even build a relationship with them because you're local.
Mhm. And
And
that's going to be, they're going to want to trust you, your local. And I see that
yeah,
actually, honestly, Ashley, you were talking about IT contracts. I see
yeah,
that a lot of times. Something breaks in my IT, something brings, that system down. It's a taxpayer system. I don't want to wait for somebody from California to come all the way out here to
yep.
service it. I want somebody that's within a 50-mile radius that can be here that afternoon and have it fixed by that afternoon. I don't want to wait and have to wait and be put into a calling queue and wait for somebody to call me back. I see that with e-procurement systems. There's a certain e-procurement system that we had at the county. It went down 10 minutes before a construction bid was due, and it came back up at 5 minutes afterwards. Well, let me
Oh,
tell you, You have a room full of construction people. They are about, they have all sorts of theories of why it happened and why they're
We
not
don't
going to be
like
able to
writing
say no.
proposals either, so you just ruined
No,
the
no,
day.
no, not with these guys. So you want somebody that's going to be local that you can make a phone call. Yeah, I can be there in 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that just kind of pulls into the whole, not just local, but just small, because
Mhm.
you still matter. There's a human answering the phone that's local, that you have a relationship with, that you've built that relationship with through all of this, and don't get me wrong, through all the AI and all the Zoom and everything, there is still something to be said about a personal approach and
Right.
having a relationship with your, vendor and your client. So I think
And that's going to be important a lot of times with county councilmen or
yeah,
council people or the town council or city councils or the mayor. If they're going to, that finance department say they have to go through an audit, they want somebody that they can call and they can be there for a council meeting, and it's not a big deal to schedule them in, and they'll drop everything. The larger agency or a larger company is not going to drop everything to be out there. They
correct.
want that personal touch.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic, ladies. I don't see any questions from our audience. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we depart this evening? Drop them in the chat now. I got to say, it certainly interesting. Gave me a couple perspectives that I hadn't really considered before, and definitely taught me that I need to do a better job at keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on around here.
Right.
Because
And
I
one of the
definitely,
things that I do is I have a Google search that sends me, you can set up your parameters of your Google search to email you. And one of the things that I do is I have one for Columbia, South Carolina. I have one for Small Business, South Carolina, and it emails me every day, the things that are going to go on within the state of South Carolina, within small business in South Carolina. And it's free, and it just gets dropped to your email usually about 3 o'clock every day, and you find out something new. And that's how you're going to find out what's coming down the pike. How am I, I'm a construction company, I'm a transportation company, what construction projects are coming? Put that Google search in, have it email you that, and then you'll know within your location of what's going to be done.
yeah, and you
Absolutely.
can prioritize who you register with based on where the opportunity is coming from. That way you're not driving yourself mad, checking cities and counties off of the list.
Right.
So this has been wonderful. Thank you, Angela, for joining
Thank you
us.
guys for having me. I've
Oh,
really enjoyed it.
meeting you,
For
Angela.
Nice to
for
meet you.
interrogating her with me. We will
Great.
be back next week. Alex says, "What's wrong with California?"
Too many people.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing, and just a lot of people. Of course, I feel
And
that way.
actually, a lot of Californians are coming to South Carolina
There's
post-COVID.
a lot of compliance.
That's because
Yeah.
So
Florida's
many labor
full.
laws.
Florida,
Okay,
we're picking up
started.
all of Florida's slack right now. So up in South Carolina, we have a large influx of New Yorkers and Californians and Texans. So
Oh, that's funny.
That'll be well. South Carolina is about to look a whole lot more like Florida then, as far as the mix. Um,
yep.
that's a good thing. Move some more businesses in, bring some more opportunities locally. I'm all about that. So
Right.
thank you everyone for joining us. Those
Thank
of you who
you.
are watching live and in the groups, submit your questions. Tune in next week. You know the drill. Talk to you soon.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
guys.
Bye, everyone.